All right, welcome to Unit 7.3. We're going to be talking today about the President's Cabinet and bureaucracy. This is pretty much an essential part of the presidency to have a group of people that you can rely on that have the same viewpoints, ideas as you do to be able to run certain aspects of the government. The president can't run the government of the United States all by himself or herself. He needs people by his side to manage certain departments. You can think of it as a school where you have the principal, but then the principal has members of his team that run various other departments. There's the social studies aspect, science, English, math. You have athletic director, nurse. You have all of these other components that where they're really good in a particular area. So we're looking at the president's cabinet, and of course we need to go back to the very beginning. And this is the very first presidential cabinet, if you will, looking at this picture right here. It started with George Washington. And it's important to understand that a cabinet is not mandated by the Constitution or even established law. But notice in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, it says he may require the opinion of. So if he wants some people by his side, he can have that privilege, he can have that opportunity, and therefore George did exactly that. He would bring in a group of advisors from different areas that would basically help to run the government. It's important that you understand who these individuals are so that you have an idea of the very first cabinet. So right here, if you look at our chart here, if you look at our picture, this is Father George, and of course George was the president of the United States. This individual is General Henry Knox, fascinating leader during the American Revolutionary War and some of the ways that he was able to move heavy machinery from one place to the next. Well, he is the Secretary of War, or what we might know of today as the Secretary of Defense. Up top here, of course, you can go back and do a lot of thinking as far as symbolisms and the way pictures are drawn. This is, what's your name, man? Alexander Hamilton. He was the Secretary of Treasury during this time. How ironic. He just happens to be standing beside Thomas Jefferson, who was the Secretary of State, who handled state affairs. And then we have to Jefferson's side. There it is. This is Edmund Randolph. He will be the first Attorney General of the United States. So we have these individuals that are here that are going to come in and help George Washington with basically running the first government. And then over the presidency, as various presidents have had these individuals, they've done different things with their particular cabinets. Of course, Washington's top two advisors, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, they couldn't stand each other. They got into arguments. It was not really good. Washington establishes the first full cabinet meeting on November 26, 1791, and very quickly you've got Jefferson and Hamilton arguing over the question of a national bank. Now, even though Broadway and history might reflect that Hamilton and Jefferson really didn't like each other, that is true. However, Jefferson believed that their disagreements, their fighting, their not getting along, had little impact on governing. Jefferson actually said, and I quote, he said, "The pain was for Hamilton myself, but the public experienced no inconvenience," end quote. So it makes for good history and makes for good discussion how these guys didn't like each other, and Jefferson kind of left and because of his disagreements with Hamilton. But at the end of the day, it really didn't hurt the government. It is interesting to note, if you go back and look at the picture, who is not there? John Adams. Adams, the vice president. is missing from the cabinet, not a part of it. And I think it's interesting, even John Adams found his role as vice president didn't really even know what he was doing and what it was for. And he actually said, once again, another quote from Adams. Adams said, the vice presidency is the most insignificant office that ever the invention of man contrived or his imagination conceived. End quote. In other words, this is useless. Why am I even here? Of course, he becomes president, really because of the vice presidency. But at the end of the day, he thought, and many today might even think, the vice presidency's role really doesn't play heavily into the nation. Now, a couple of other individuals. We had Andrew Jackson. He had a cabinet, but he had another cabinet. And he referred to a group of informal advisors as his kitchen cabinet. Basically, he would get together with his cronies, with his best friends, and he would talk to them and say, look, this is what's going on. I could use your help. So some of these guys were not even part of the administration, but he still relied on them for their information and for their help. So they were called the kitchen cabinet. And then Abraham Lincoln, I thought it was pretty funny kind of how Abraham Lincoln saw the cabinet. He once took a vote with his cabinet, and they were all against what he was trying to do. None of them thought it was a good idea. They thought it was terrible. And so he asked their opinion. He said, let's take a vote. See his quote. He said, 7 nays, there's 1 aye, so the ayes have it. What does this mean? It just shows that the president believes that he is the one who ultimately makes the decision, and regardless sometimes of what even his trusted advisors think, he will sometimes go against them and still do what he wants to do. And then finally, Kennedy, he would pay more attention to basically his brother, who was the attorney general, rather than even his formal cabinet. So you have this thing where people bring people who are close to them, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're always going to use their opinions. The cabinet today, if we look at it, we've got these 15 cabinet departments, which each have subunits in it. The smallest one is known as the State Department. It has 25,000 employees, and the largest is what Henry Knox used to have, the Secretary of War, now known as this Department of Defense. It has over 2 million employees. Of course, recognizing those are military individuals and then some. The cabinet today, here they are. You have State, Treasury, Defense, Justice, Interior, Agriculture, Commerce, Labor, Homeland Security, Veterans Affairs, Education, Energy, Transportation, Housing, Urban Development, Health and Human Services. All of these play a key role in certain aspects of the government, and so you have individuals who are in charge of each particular area, and then there are subunits under that particular area. Why does this matter? Well, it is important to note that each of these individuals could possibly become president if something was to happen. We have this thing called the designated survivor, in which, if you notice, every January when the president gives his State of the Union, not all of the members of the president's cabinet and government attend. And the reason for that is if there was to be some tremendous tragedy where a lot of government officials lost their lives at once, who would be in charge? What would be the role? Who would take over? And as you can see, after the president, it's the vice president, then it's the Speaker of the House, the president pro tempore. But then we start getting into the cabinet positions, and you can kind of see how it's been established. And at the very bottom, Secretary of Homeland Security. So if something tragic was to happen to the first 8, then the Secretary of Agriculture would immediately become president. That's kind of the presidential succession. I'm not going to go through in great detail all of these particular cabinet positions because, of course, there's a lot that you could talk about and look at. Of course, you can see that the State Department handles the foreign policy. Notice down here at the bottom as you go through the slides, this is the amount of money, budgeting-wise, that they use with the government each year. $47 billion comes out of the state, and they have approximately 69,000 people that work for the State Department. These are individuals such as ambassadors who live in countries representing the interest of America. So this is the State Department. They handle foreign policy affairs, relationships between us and other countries. We have the Treasury Department, of course, people today in 2020 thinking about the stimulus checks with the coronavirus. All of that's coming through the Treasury Department. They're also the ones who handle the IRS and taxes. Notice they have a budget of $14 billion. They've got 86,000 people that work at the Treasury Department. It's amazing to have 86,000 people, but if you try to call to get some help for your taxes, nobody's there. Go figure. We have the Department of Defense. This might be familiar to you. For those of you who traveled with us to Washington, this is the Pentagon. And as you can see, it was the War Department, and then it changed to Department of Defense. We have the overseer of the armed forces through what's known as the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And that's where you have the Army, Navy, Air Force, the Marines and ongoing, who oversee basically the armed forces. Notice 2.8 million employees, 2.8 million employees, and notice $534 billion. Department of Justice, this is the ones that deal with alcohol, tobacco, firearms, with the with court systems, with police, prisons. That all kind of goes through the DOJ, if you will, Department of Justice. Here is your Department of Interior. I know it sounds funny when we're talking about interior, but that's referring to like Yellowstone National Park, oil reserves, different things of that nature. We also use this department overseas relationships with Native Americans. Department of Agriculture, of course, North Carolinians are very thankful for this as it helps with farming and with conservation and safeguards the nation's food supply. You have to think about what happens if we had a situation where we had no food. We need the Department of Agriculture to ensure safety when it comes to processing of food, packaging of food, delivering of food, handling of food. That's where you get all of those United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, when you're looking at meat that has been inspected to keep people from getting sick. That's in thanks to the Department of Agriculture. Department of Commerce helps with working on job creation. Notice it also carries out the census. This is 2020. It's important for us to be doing the census now because this allows us to see where monies go for each state. Also representatives for Congress. So it's important. If you haven't had your family do the census, make sure that they are completing their census. It is extremely important. There's not many people that work for the Department of Commerce, as you can see, nor do they have a very large budget. Department of Labor deals with safe working conditions, minimum wages. It talks about data of employment. And so with jobs, this is extremely important when you're thinking, some of you are doing committees about small businesses. Also, employees, you have certain rights. If you work, if you go into where you clock in or punch in, or there is a poster that details the rights that you have as an employee. You can't be overworked. You can't be discriminated against, harassed, things like that. And so we see these safe working conditions coming from the Department of Labor. Health and Human Services, very important right now, involved in improving the health, safety, and well-being of America. They deal with Medicare and Medicaid. Housing and Urban Development deals with housing. This is coming about to basically assist communities to ensure neighborhoods, equal housing opportunities, and just if you think about what's known as Section A housing, other aspects, all of that coming through what's known as HUD, Housing and Urban Development. Department of Transportation oversees all of the bridges and airline travel, railroads, those aspects. We also have the Department of Energy, nuclear programs, that's our energy policies, constantly working on helping us with how we use the resources we have. It is interesting talking about the Human Genome Project. That's maybe we'll spend a little more time talking about that a little bit later. And then there's the Department of Education. By the way, just remember North Carolina is in charge of all rules guiding your education. The Department of Education basically coordinates federal assistance programs. Veterans Affairs, medical care for military veterans and families. And then we come to Homeland Security, which is protecting the borders, terrorist threats, also disaster prevention. This is the newest department. Keep that in mind. It was the one created, the latest, the newest one in 2002 after 9/11. And you can take a look at government bureaucracy and see that it's very complex. So hopefully this gives you some insight into the roles of the cabinet.